Agnes grew up in a house filled with love. In the small residence on the outskirts of the city, her family cultivated traditions that warmed the heart. Every night, no matter how tired they were, her parents insisted on having dinner together at the wooden table her grandfather had built. Between bites, they shared the events of the day, celebrated small victories, and comforted each other in times of difficulty. "Never go to sleep without saying, 'I love you' to those who matter," her mother would say, while serving steaming soup on winter nights. Her father, a very affectionate man with many gestures, always added, "And never forget to show how you feel. Words alone are just air. It takes action to bring them to life." It was in this environment that Agnes learned to see love as something tangible, something that is continuously expressed through words and gestures. Spontaneous hugs, kisses on the forehead before leaving for school, affectionate notes in the lunchbox. All of this was a natural part of her routine. Frank, on the other hand, came from a home where the walls seemed to absorb any expression of affection. His father, a rough and feared man, had created a strict code of what it meant to be a man. "Men are defined by achievements, not by feelings," he constantly repeated. In the Thompson household, there were no family dinners, only coexistence under the same roof. Conversations were limited to the necessary, and displays of affection were seen as weaknesses to be avoided. When they met in their senior year of high school, Agnes and Frank seemed to orbit in different universes. She, outgoing and active in the student council. He, reserved and focused on securing the scholarship that would guarantee him a bright future. It was during a science project that their paths truly crossed. "We need to study the effect of light on plants. Do you know anything about photosynthesis?" Frank asked, direct and to the point. Agnes smiled, her brown eyes lighting up with the opportunity to get to know that mysterious boy better. "I know it's quite an illuminating process," she answered with a pun that elicited something rare from Frank, a genuine smile. The project stretched over weeks, during which Agnes discovered in Frank a keen intelligence and an admirable determination. Behind that serious facade, there was a young man who dreamed of transforming the world through technology, but who rarely shared his dreams with anyone. The first kiss happened in the library, hidden among shelves of biology books, after finishing the final report. It was awkward and brief, but enough for both to know they wanted more of each other. The relationship blossomed. Agnes brought colour to Frank's monochromatic life, while he offered her a more pragmatic perspective on life. They walked hand in hand through the school corridors, always at her initiative. When they watched movies at Agnes's house, it was she who snuggled up to his chest, while he shyly wrapped his arm around her. After 3 months together, on an autumn afternoon, sitting under a tree in the city park, Agnes looked into Frank's eyes and said the words that had been pulsing in her chest for weeks. "I love you, Frank." The silence that followed was heavier than all the leaves falling around them. Frank swallowed hard, his eyes shifting to the horizon. "Thank you," he finally replied, his voice low and hesitant. Agnes felt a tightness in her chest, but she smiled nonetheless. "It's okay," she said, trying to hide the disappointment. "You don't have to say anything now." But time passed, and the words never came. Frank was attentive in his own way. He remembered important dates, helped her with her studies, gave her small gifts that he knew she would like. However, the invisible wall surrounding his emotions remained insurmountable. When they held hands, it was always Agnes who intertwined her fingers with his. When they said goodbye, it was she who initiated the hug. When they talked about the future, it was she who spoke about shared dreams. They had been together for 3 years when they went to the wedding of Agnes's best friend. The hall was decorated with delicate lights and white flowers, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. During the ceremony, while the couple exchanged vows, Agnes looked at Frank with bright eyes. "Imagine when it's the two of us at the altar," she whispered, gently squeezing his hand. Frank remained motionless, his face an impenetrable expression. Neither a smile nor a handshake in return, just a slight nod that could mean anything. That night, during the drive back home, the silence in the car was different from the comfortable silences they sometimes shared. It was dense, heavy with unspoken words. "Frank," Agnes began, gathering courage as he parked in front of her house. "Do you see yourself having a future with me?" He kept his hands on the steering wheel, his knuckles white from the grip. "Of course I do. We've been together for so long. I think that's evidence that I want you in my life," she insisted. "I'm asking if you see me in your future." The car engine was still running, the soft purring filling the silence between them. "Do you even feel anything for me?" Agnes's voice trembled slightly. "Of course I do," he replied, finally turning to face her. "We've been together for so long, you should know that." Agnes's eyes filled with tears. "Then say you love me. At least once. Say that you love me." Frank lowered his gaze, his hand still gripping the steering wheel as if seeking support. The silence said everything he couldn't express. "Goodbye, Frank," Agnes said, getting out of the car with a broken heart. In the weeks that followed, Frank tried to make contact. Messages, calls, even letters, always with the same rational explanations, the same apologies without ever mentioning the one thing Agnes needed to hear. Eventually, she stopped responding. College in different cities sealed their fate. Life took its course. 20 years passed like pages turned by the wind. Frank Thompson became the CEO of a rising tech company. His office occupied the top floor of the glass and steel building in the city's financial center. From there, he could see the horizon stretch infinitely, but the view did not fill the emptiness he carried within him. Agnes followed a different path than she had planned. Her dreams of becoming a teacher were interrupted when her parents became ill simultaneously. As an only child, she took on the responsibility of caring for them, dropping out of college in her 3rd year. After both of them passed away, with few resources and unfinished qualifications, she took jobs that paid the bills. When the opportunity to work for the cleaning company servicing large corporations came up, she didn't hesitate. The reunion happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Agnes was covering for a sick colleague, cleaning the corridor leading to the meeting room on the top floor, a location that was not usually part of her route. Frank was walking hurriedly, his eyes fixed on the tablet in his hands, when he almost collided with the cleaning cart. As he looked up to apologize, time seemed to freeze. "Agnes!" The word slipped out as a surprised sigh. She remained still, the instant recognition making her heart race. Frank was different. Slightly grey at the temples, expression lines marking his face, broader shoulders under the impeccable suit, but his eyes were the same ones that had looked at her so many times without really revealing what they felt. "Frank," she finally responded, instinctively adjusting her uniform. What a surprise. The conversation that followed was brief and uncomfortable, filled with superficial questions and even more superficial answers. When Frank's phone rang announcing a meeting, it was almost a relief for both of them. "It was nice to see you," he said, seeming to want to say more. "Likewise," Agnes replied, turning her attention back to work. In the days that followed, their encounters in the hallways became more frequent, too many coincidences to be mere chance. Frank began to arrive earlier and leave later, creating opportunities for brief interactions that always ended with the feeling of something unresolved lingering between them. After 2 weeks of this silent dance, Frank finally mustered the courage for a more direct approach. "Agnes, would you like to have a coffee with me after work to catch up?" She hesitated, weighing the risks of reopening old wounds. In the end, curiosity won. "All right, I finish at 6. In the small cafe a few blocks from the building, seated at a secluded table, 20 years of untold stories began to flow. Frank spoke about his career, the path he took to reach his current position, briefly mentioning failed relationships and the absence of children. Agnes shared her more difficult journey. The years dedicated to her sick parents, the double grief she faced when she lost them just 3 months apart, and the struggle to rebuild her life afterward. The hardest part, she confessed, twirling the teacup in her hands, is the absence of daily affection. My parents were very affectionate people. There was always an "I love you" before bedtime, a hug for no reason, words of encouragement. I miss hearing that I'm loved, that I'm important to someone. Frank observed her with a new intensity, as if he really saw her for the first time. I'm sorry for everything you've been through, Agnes. You deserved more from life. Life rarely gives us what we deserve, she replied with a sad smile. Only what we manage to build with what we have. That coffee initiated a new routine. Once a week they met to talk, rediscovering each other as adults with scars and wisdom they did not possess in their youth. Frank learned about Agnes's new passion for mystery books and gardening. Agnes discovered that Frank had become a volunteer in a mentoring program for young people from disadvantaged communities. What neither of them mentioned was the past they shared, specifically, the way they had parted. It was as if they both circled around that memory, acknowledging its presence, but avoiding touching it directly. On a Thursday morning, Agnes arrived early to clean the executive offices before the day's activity began. Upon entering Frank's office, she was surprised by his presence. He rarely arrived before 8. Sorry, she said, stepping back towards the door. I'll come back later. No, please stay, Frank replied, standing up from the table. I'm just here to get a head start on some reports. Agnes nodded and began to work quietly, aware of his gaze following her movements. When she finished cleaning the surfaces and was getting ready to leave, the sound of the door being locked made her turn, confused. Frank was standing by the door, the key in one hand, the other nervously running through his hair, a gesture she recognized from 2 decades ago. Agnes, he began, his voice more vulnerable than she had ever heard. I need to tell you something I should have said 20 years ago. He approached slowly, as if fearing she might disappear if he made any sudden movements. When they were just a step apart, Frank took a deep breath and continued. I was a fool. My father always said that expressing feelings was for weak men. It took me a long time, too long, to understand how wrong that was. His eyes shone with restrained emotion. I waited 20 years to say this, Agnes. I love you. The silence that followed seemed laden with all the words never spoken between them over the years. Frank gently took her hands in his eyes fixed on hers. I love you, Agnes. I have always loved you. Since that afternoon in the park when you first told me, I already loved you. But I didn't know how to say it. I didn't believe I deserved to feel that way. Give me one more chance to love you as you deserve to be loved. Agnes felt her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. 20 years of life lived apart, 20 years of other experiences, other relationships, other versions of themselves. Frank, we don't even know each other anymore. We are different people now. I know, he agreed. And I want to know who you have become. I want you to know who I have become. I'm not asking us to go back to what we were. I'm asking us to discover what we can be. For the first time, Agnes saw in his eyes everything he felt, without reservations, without walls, just raw and vulnerable truth. The boy who didn't know how to express emotions had transformed into a man who finally understood his worth. In the months that followed, Agnes discovered a completely different Frank from the one she had known in her youth. He now initiated hugs, naturally held her hand while they walked, said, I love you, without hesitation, not just with words but with small daily gestures. They visited her parents' grave together, where Frank spoke to them as if they could hear him, thanking them for raising such an extraordinary woman and promising to take care of her as they would have wished. On a spring Sunday, while tending to the small garden they had started together, Frank kneeled among the newly planted daisies and offered Agnes a simple but elegant ring. I don't want to wait another day to start the rest of our lives together, he said, his eyes shimmering with emotion. 20 years ago, you asked me if I saw myself marrying you, and I was too cowardly to tell the truth. Today, I'm asking if you see me as your husband, your partner, your best friend, for as long as we have left." Agnes looked at the man kneeling before her, no longer the scared boy who couldn't express his feelings, but a man who had learned the value of love and the cost of hiding it. "Yes," she replied, feeling the tears flow freely. "Yes, I see you in all my tomorrows." When they kissed among flowers and damp earth, both felt that time, even 20 years of it, was not an obstacle, but simply part of the journey they needed to take to be truly ready for each other. After all, love has no expiration date. Sometimes it just needs time to mature, like seeds planted together, patiently waiting for the right moment to bloom. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.